Hello, everyone, and welcome to the final author interview for the month of July. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And to cap off our final author interview for the month of July, my guest today is a first timer here on the channel. She is an author who writes fantasy and other genres. When her nose isn't in a book, she can be found in a museum or on the back of a horse. She lives in North Carolina with her husband and two kids, although it could be argued that she more also lives in her stories. Don't we all as authors? She is the author of Blessed by the Fae, The Lost Amulet, World at War, and her upcoming release of Fae and Wicked Kings, which will feature in the Romancing the Rogue anthology. So, to tell us all about that and more, and her journey of being an author and what she's learned in the business, let's give a huge round of applause to our final author of the month of July, Jada McCrary. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
You did, and thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
Awesome, Jada. Awesome. So, what else can you tell us about your background? Were you always interested in stories growing up? And were telling stories sort of like your aha moment later in life, in the sense that you wanted to share with them and publish them?
So, I started writing in kindergarten. I continued writing, but mainly just a bunch of stories that I had ideas for. I didn't quite stick with one until about last year. In first and second grade, would read my stories to other classrooms, and that really
Ooh,
instilled a love for writing in me. Now I started publishing my own books back in 20 January 2023, and I've actually stuck with the same stories now.
nice, nice. And speaking of your stories, you have an upcoming one soon of Fae and Wicked Kings. Now, for the first time viewers here on the channel, what can you tell us of your upcoming story, as well as your other ones, as a little teaser?
So, of Fae and Wicked Kings is set in the same world as Blessed by the Fae. It is a world where there's humans and Fae, and there's a portal that connects their realms. Of Fae and Wicked Kings is a dark fantasy villain gets the girl type romance,
Ooh, okay.
and it is kind of like a novella, but it will be included in a collection of stories just like it called
Nice.
Romancing the Rogue.
Ooh, all right. Villain gets the girl. I don't think I've ever had an author story be that, but I'm very, very intrigued. So let's actually talk about that. So let's go back in time. So when you actually were first starting with this universe of Blessed by the Fae. So when you began this journey with this story, did you have a goal in mind as well as a desire you want to satisfy for your future readers?
So, yes, I wanted something that would have both action and romance, that would have plenty of plot twists, and that would
Okay.
make people both laugh and maybe get a little nervous about what might come.
Ooh, okay, okay. And so then when you finally progress from the first draft and to the second and then final draft, finding the cover artist or the illustrator to make the cover and finally getting it out there published, what was the initial reaction like for Blessed by the Fae? Were the responses positive? Were they mixed? And is there one review that stands out to you?
So, yes, I've had almost 50 reviews on, or almost 40 reviews on Amazon, and over
Wow.
50 on Goodreads.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It sits at 4.3 stars on Amazon right now and 4.0 on Goodreads. And I think one of the reviews that stuck out to me the most, there was somebody who said they were hooked after the first few chapters and they read it within a day. There was somebody who compared it to A Court of Thorns and Roses and The Hobbit.
Ooh. All right, I like it. Nice. So that's very good. That's actually quite the comparison, but congratulations for that. And would you agree that those initial reactions, in a way, validated your goals with this series?
I would say so, yes. I
Nice.
think that readers got the full effect of what I intended them to get.
All right. So now let's actually talk about, the whole process of, crafting this world. And the reason I bring this up is that I'm sure you definitely agree, Jada, that being an author is a very lonely business, as well as a little bit of anxiety, because you never know if the readers are really going to enjoy this story or if you're really writing in the genre that you feel you are the best in. Because curious, how long would you say it took you to create Blessed by the Fae?
So I wrote Blessed by the Fae within 13 months. The Lost
Wow.
Amulet was about 30,000 words less. That took me 7 months, but that was my main focus at the time. Blessed by the Fae was more of a side project. And
Oh, okay.
Blessed by the Fae ended up turning into something that people loved even more. Um, so my my focus has kind of shifted towards giving the readers what they want.
Okay. All right. Nice. I did not know. Well, kudos to you for pumping out a book in that short amount of time, like little like over just a year and a month. That is incredible. And the reason why I bring this up, viewers and listeners, as I said numerous times, it's not easy getting a book out. It's long, it's tedious from the edits, cover artists, shaping the book, formatting it to where you exactly want it, either you want to be a paperback, you want to be a hardcover, whatever, and then publishing it independently or traditionally on the digital stage, it is anxiety fuel, because you never know if it's going to hit with your readers, because we ourselves are the first target audience. If we don't enjoy our stories, how can anyone else enjoy it? So for you, Jada, did you ever have those moments of like anxiety or even imposter syndrome when crafting the world of Blessed by the Fae? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to continue this story, as well as, tell this particular story and why it's so important to share with it?
So for me, it was never so much of worrying if people are going to like it, because it was more important to me to get the story out. I'm building a brand. It's not going to be something, well, not usually do you find it take off right from book 1. Usually you
Right.
have to keep writing, keep getting your stuff out there until you find your reader base. So for
Hmm.
me, what motivates me is in the future it's going to take off. I'm going to get into that rhythm and people are going to keep coming back for more. And on top of that, if I keep writing, basically God gives me a lot of my inspiration. So if I lose inspiration, I just pray and then I have it again. Or there will be times when I will write in a line here that I feel God wants me to put in there. It'll be a single line that doesn't seem to fit. And then like a next book later, that one line will have a huge impact. And for any readers watching who are curious about an example, The Lost Amulet, where it talks about giving self defense lessons to civilians, that was one of those.
Ooh, all right, nice. And it actually kind of goes in perfectly now into the business side of being an author, because as you said just now, you are building your brand as an author with your first book, Blessed by the Fae, kind of being the jumping point into the world you are creating, as well as establishing your voice as an author. So let's actually start at the beginning. So when you finished, with the final edits of Blessed by the Fae, did you want to have this book published traditionally with a publishing house, big or small? Or did you feel because of the story of Blessed by Fae is so close to you that it's like, the beginning of this new world and building a brand as an author, you believe that independent would be the better choice?
So for me, I know how hard it is to get traditionally published. So eventually, if I choose to go that route, I'm working towards releasing a bunch of books first and proving why I would be a good candidate for that. So
Okay.
I released it kind of within, so I released most of my stuff on Kindle Vella first. And
Oh, all right.
due to their rules, you have to wait a set time period before publishing in book format. So as soon as it was past that time is when I released it.
Ah, fascinating. I did not know that. That's what everyone tells me about Amazon. Amazon has its own process, but definitely Amazon seems to be, next to Barnes and Noble, the next big hub for indie authors because Amazon has, of course, a bigger audience. They're able to ship books everywhere, and the reviews are just so like incredible, and it's ridiculous. So now let's actually turn to the audience because audience is important. As I said before, viewers and listeners, we ourselves are our first audience for our own stories. And if we don't enjoy our stories, then our readers are not going to. So we have to enjoy these stories first to share them. So for you, Jada, how easy or difficult was it for you to really understand who your audience was for Blessed by the Fae, Amulet, War of the World, and of Fae and Wicked Kings? How was that process?
So for me, my audience is going to be somebody who, whether it's young adult or new adult, they're looking for enough plot to keep them going, enough action. Um, I write only clean romance or romancesy. So somebody who is great for all ages. It's
All right.
something that you will not, I mean, I wouldn't, there is some violence in some of them, but
Of
so
course.
just parents just keep an eye on your children. But it's safe for pretty much all ages to read. There's going to be fantastical creatures. So anybody who enjoys fantasy, who enjoys humor, who enjoys feeling and like feeling like they're going with the characters on their quests is going to like my books.
Nice. And as an add on to that, in your opinion, how important is it for authors to really understand who their audiences are?
So you're going to want to make sure that you are consistent. Your
Mm,
readers are going to expect certain things from you. So if you are branching out way too far out of what you're used to, you might get somebody who's disappointed that
right.
they bought your book because of your name and they weren't expecting it to be what it is. So my main advice is be consistent. And if you do have an idea that's completely different, you might want to consider a new pen name.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, and that's actually really interesting because, I haven't had a lot of authors talk about, pen names. And for those who don't know, viewers and listeners, pen names are like aliases that authors sometimes take. You may have the same author write different genres of books, but if one author is known, or I should say, if that author is known for, let's say, one genre of books, so if it's fantasy, but they really want to go into science fiction, but they know they may not be the best science fiction writer, they may want to go with a pen name, or it could be for a multitude of different reasons. But pen names, I think, are an interesting discussion. And then another topic that I always find interesting sharing with my guests is, of course, who were the titans of the publishing world, of the literature world, that inspired, my guests to write and to find their own voice as an author. So for you, Jada, are there any authors or books you would like to mention that really helped you hone your author voice when creating this universe that you are very proud of?
So I personally don't like my voice is basically what comes out of my head. I don't have
Okay.
anybody that I will kind of model it after, but there may be books that I will see something I like in it, like a type of theme or something that I might think, hey, that might be a good theme to include. So the kind of caliber I'm trying to aim for would be maybe like Throne of Glass in terms of plot, and so that it's got like a bunch of epic action, epic quests. And then in terms of romance and humor, a good example would be K.M. Shea. She's got
Okay.
magical or no Magiford Supernatural City, and so her books are clean romances with lots of humor.
All right, all right. And as an add-on to this, I would like to hear your thoughts on this discussion. So I'm sure you definitely agree, Jada, that you've probably seen a lot of books that may have had this certain tagline, which is the next so and so, or if blank and blank had a kid. Those are popular on a lot of commercial style books. As readers, when we see that, we get a preconceived notion or expectation of what this book is going to be like in terms of how it reads, how the characters are presented, the author's style of writing, and so forth. But one of my guests earlier this month had a comment to that, and in his opinion, he argues that it's not really beneficial for indie authors because it gives their readers a preconceived notion of what to expect. Because when you read an indie author's book and it has like that tagline, you shouldn't expect like, oh, it's gonna read like Stephen King or it's gonna read like J.K. Rowling. It's gonna read like Tolkien or Martin. It shouldn't. In his opinion, when you pick up an indie author's book, you should be introduced to a new style of writing and new storytelling. That way, when their next book comes out, you already have an idea of what to expect. So I was wondering if you can have any comments to that discussion, Jada.
So I would actually agree with that. Um, there's nothing wrong with those kinds of taglines, I don't believe, but in the same sense, you do want to build your brand. You want to let readers learn who you are and how you write, how you speak. If they are going into that expecting something different, then there could be some disappointment there.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. And now going over to the readership. Now, you already mentioned this before, but I wanted to go more in depth. Now, the reason why I bring up readership, viewers, and listeners is because I would argue they're a little bit different from the audience. Yes, you can market to a specific audience, where it's the fantasy audience or the romance fantasy audience, epic, high fantasy, whatever, or even other genres. But who exactly is going to read the story? I'm sure you definitely read it, that there are some books that may be mislabeled or miscategorized where they may be young adult, but reading them, they're a little bit more new adult, or even some spicy romance if it's like romance, fantasy, young adult. But then you have other books that are on the opposite ends where they're geared towards, the adult category, but they read more so for young adults. So for you, Jada, you said your book was sort of like, in the middle, where young adults can read and new adults and adults can enjoy the story as well. How challenging would you say that process was in terms of your writing to present this equilibrium style story where both sides of the spectrum can enjoy?
So I think a lot of problem for the youth is the spice level.
Mm-hmm.
I am of the mind that if you have a good enough plot, you don't need all that spice.
Right.
So that's more where I'm coming from, is that there's going to be enough to keep anyone entertained, and it's safe for parents to let their children read. I've had several people review and say they let their teenager read Blessed by the Fae and they loved it. And then I've had adults read it and love it.
All right, nice. Because I definitely think I've had a lot of young adult authors on the show, and the discussion always varies, but generally they find it very very difficult to write either solely for young adults, but many have found that sort of balance which you have for your series, where it's not solely catering to young adults, but it's not solely catering to new adults and adults. Do you find that sort of like a liberating experience, in the sense that you're not trying to change your language, or like, as one of my guests said, like dumb down language, either it's like for young adults or make it too complicated for adults?
Well, I'll be honest. I just write how I talk. So I'm not going to adjust it. I feel that if a reader enjoys it, they'll keep reading. If they do not, if they have a problem with the language, then they're, they may not keep reading. I do know that with Kindle, it's very easy to look up words. Not that I'm trying to put a bunch of large words in there, but if there ends up a few slip in there, then it's okay.
All
I
right.
did
All right.
read Christopher Paolini's Inheritance series, Aragon.
Oh yes.
That one, when I read it at probably 16, it had a lot of terms I was unfamiliar with, and I looked at it as an opportunity to enhance my vocabulary.
Ah, all right, nice. And now, kind of like the next business question, which I really want to hear your thoughts on. So, definitely in the romance fantasy, that genre or subgenre of fantasy is exploding. It's dominating the publishing world. I mean, you can go into like a Barnes and Noble bookstore, and literally romance fantasy is the dominant player. Even books that aren't trying to be romance fantasy have romance in them, and there are different tropes that are across the way. I mean, it's insane. But one of my guests brought up that for writing solely in fantasy, it's kind of intimidating, going back to that anxiety, because of course romance fantasy is the dominant one. Yes, you have high epic fantasy stories, but they also have romance elements in them. You have, dark fantasy, dystopian fantasy, whatever. And sometimes authors may be tempted to change their stories or add elements that don't necessarily belong, which of course doesn't feel very organic. And in your opinion, Jada, does that sort of like take away the authenticity of the author's voice when they try to make it commercial, in the sense of where they can join the hype train?
Um, for the most part, it does take away. I think there's a difference between seeing something that's popular and putting your own spin on it, and then copying someone else.
Yes.
So I think most people are going to be upset if they read the same story packaged in a different cover. But if you've got something that may have this some of the same elements, yet it's an original story, people are going to flock to what they like. If they liked a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and you've got one that's got some same theme but different story, they're going to read that because they like the other. Now, if you copied the same exact thing, they're probably not going to be happy. They're going to feel it's repetitive.
Hmm. Definitely, 100%. And give an example. I'm sure you've definitely seen those Disney inspired fantasy novels where they're like the what ifs, like what if Jafar got the lamp, or what if Rapunzel didn't meet so and so? What if Ariel lost? Like all that stuff. Like it's still the same stories with the same characters. Well, I shouldn't say the same stories. It's in the same world as the original story, but it's an author's own spin to it, and it's very, very fascinating. And ultimately, for all authors, we want to have some sense of legacy because when we do eventually go, our work will be all that's left of us. And sometimes this is where I like to discuss, the two paths to be an author and to be known as an author. And for me, to be an author is an individual who's solely dedicated to the art of storytelling, where they're not being motivated solely by capital. Capital is nice, but it's not the driving factor. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to marketing, publishing, promoting their work on every platform through any means. And either path is good for the individual, but in both, there are goals that need to be realistic. And I definitely feel for the other path, to be known as an author, you do have the unrealistic goals take shape, where we believe that our debut novel is going to be the start of our legacy. But the honest truth is, there is no guarantee that an author's first work guarantees their legacy. There are exceptions to that rule, of course, but a majority of authors, rise, fall, and rinse and repeat. And again, it goes to those long term goals that you set out with your story. Sometimes some authors start off writing to be their sole source of income. And unfortunately, that passion dies because they're no longer interested in telling stories for fun or as a hobby, it's now for work. So, Jada, in your opinion, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, what is, or I should say, why is it important for authors, especially first time authors, to really understand that concept that in the world of publishing, there is no guarantee that your debut novel or debut series guarantees your legacy's beginning?
So I'm of the mind that if you want something, you are going to have to be willing to work for it.
Mm-hmm.
There, like you said, there are no guarantees that it's going to take off at first. It will possibly and most likely take you multiple books until you gain some traction. And if you live a life comparing yourself to other people, you're going to be unhappy. You're going
Yeah,
to give up before you get your big break. You don't know if that next book is going to take you to the place you've been dreaming of. But if you stop, then you've already lost.
definitely. And also to add to that, if you are passionate and you do want to be known as an author, that just takes grit and determination, because grit transforms into talent, and we only get better as authors as time goes on. I mean, look at the books of like, J.K. Rowling, George R. Martin. J.K. Rowling, her first story took her almost like 2 decades to get off the ground. And that skyrocketed her to status. Like George R. Martin, fans are still waiting for the next book in that series. They're like messaging him repeatedly. It's crazy, but ultimately, yes, grit transformed into talent. And you're absolutely right. It may be your 10th book or even your 20th book that really gets your name across. And that is the one book that people will most know you for. It's the same with movies. An actor could play numerous characters or numerous roles in films, but for fans of that actor, they may know him for one character. Case in point, Sylvester Stallone as Rocky and Rambo. He's done a whole bunch of other projects, but people will always know him for those two roles. It's the same thing as writing. And when that happens, you can tell your fans and readers, hey, if you've enjoyed this book, see my other ones to see my growth as an author. And that also comes from networking as well, especially in the independent community. So for Jada, I was wondering if you could tell us about your experiences in networking, meeting other independent authors, and what you've learned from them.
Okay. Well, I have to say, most authors are extremely helpful people. Um, they have been through the business, they have made their mistakes and learned what works, and they're more than willing to share their expertise. So it's a very helpful and supportive community for the most part. There are those that are not on the other side, but
Hmm.
that's everywhere. I
Yes.
would say it's good to join writing groups. It's good
Hmm.
to ask for help if you need it. And if you make some friends in the writing community, there's opportunities to collaborate as well.
Definitely, definitely. And are there any authors you'd like to give a shout out to who have, really helped you sort of understand the business of being an indie author?
So, yes, I would say Brittany Carter.
All
Um,
right.
there's TM Goodkey, sorry. Sophia Chan, CN Noble, Tasha Creed, Harper Lynn, Megan Mosier, and Kat Keenan are the people who have helped me the most.
Nice. And this is what I love about the independent community because we're all in the same boat together. I know many people would like to assume that it's a cutthroat business that we're all trying to one up the other, but we're not. We're trying to be there for each other's successes because we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to get our books across. We're all trying to reach, our audience, our readers, and we make these connections and, you know, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, those are like some of like the homes of the independent community. And that's another thing too, viewers and listeners, the independent community is growing so much that yes, traditional publishing is still the dominant force, but independent publishing has come a long way in 20 years. There was this stereotype or stigma that if something was traditionally published, or rather, sorry, independently published, it wasn't professional. You could easily tell the difference between something that was traditional and one that wasn't. But now more than ever, 20 years later, you can't tell the difference between an indie book and a traditional publishing book because the quality has gotten so good and also the writing of independent books has gotten so good. So it's really, really crazy. So for you, Jada, looking back on that and also the success of your series, have you ever thought how different your life would be if you were not a writer?
Um, so it would probably be quite different because before this, I didn't have something I was so passionate about that I would do anything to make it work.
Okay.
This is something that I am intending to make my full time career, that I'm intending to replace my day job eventually. And it's because it's something I love doing. It would be completely different if I had stayed in just a job for the money, but I'm doing something that I actually value, that I believe in, and that is very rewarding work.
Nice. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, that is what all of us are trying to achieve, where we can transition away from, jobs that help, finance our passions for writing to where our writing is our main source, that it is our full-time job, that we can live off of the success of our royalties, our stuff of our books, and hopefully, who knows, books can be adapted to screen, to meet other forms of media, video games, comic books, whatever. Ultimately, I think that is among the many dreams every author has. So, Jada, we're almost nearing the end of this interview. So, the last few questions that I have are: have you ever gotten a sense of validation from other authors who have come across your work? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is in any industry or in any business, it's one thing to bring the knowledge you have into a business and trying to make it your own. It's another thing entirely when your peers recognize your work and give credit where credit is due. And the reason I bring that up is that one of my guests had this column to say to this question, which is, doesn't matter if one person reads your book or 500 people read your book. If someone reads your book, you're an author. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that topic.
So yes, as a new author, having only been releasing books since last year, there haven't been a ton of my peers who have read it, but um, particularly for Of Fae and Wicked Kings, which is in the Romancing the Rogue anthology coming out on the 31st of October. They,
Right.
the ladies I'm releasing this with, have told me that it is pretty good. They love the romance aspects. They love the plot twists. So that did make me feel validated in a sense. But it really doesn't matter how many people read it as long as one person liked it.
Definitely. It's the same thing as one of my other guests who brought it up, where it's like, doesn't matter how many people read your book. If someone reads it, you are an author. You are a storyteller. And I think ultimately, going back to legacy, every author will achieve a sense of immortality because our words in our stories are the last things that will be a reminder of who we were and inspiring the next generation. I mean, that's why people read Tolkien, Frank Herbert's Dune, C.S. Lewis, and the other titans of the past, even authors now, because they know sooner or later they're going to reach a point where they can't tell stories anymore, and their works are literally going to be, a window into who they are. And ultimately, that's the end goal. That is a sense of immortality, a true legacy, as one of my other guests would say. And so now we arrive at the final question, Jada. And this question is a big reflective question. And it's this. So, with everything you have learned up to this point, and will continue to learn about the industry from, friends, family, beta readers, ARC readers, and fellow authors who you worked with, who you shared notes with, the writing groups you've been a part of, and what you learned thus far with your series, what is your word of wisdom to the other authors who are watching this video, or even people who love to write and have a story in their head that they want to share with the world?
Yes, so I would say first, don't be too critical of your work. A lot of times we are our own worst critic. So
Yes.
don't just look at what you've written and trash it because you feel it isn't good. Most of the time, you've got, if not, you've got a good piece there, then it might only need a little tweaking. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Second, don't let imposter syndrome stop you from reaching for greatness. And don't compare your timeline of success to other people's because yours will happen in its own time. Just keep writing.
Awesome. Straight to the point. I absolutely love that. And this concludes this incredible author interview, ending the month of July, and we'll begin the month of August in a few days. Thank you all so very much for joining us for our final author interview of the month of July. A huge thank you to Jada for coming on the show and telling us all about her stories, Blessed by the Fae, A Fae of Wicked Kings, and more. Jada, thank you so very much. Where can people find and engage with you on social media, as well as purchase a copy of any one of your stories?
So I'm on Instagram at author Jada McCrary. I'm on Facebook. Um, and I'm on TikTok, although I don't post as much there. My link tree has an email that you can reach me at, as well as links to all my books. And that
Awesome.
is linktr.ee/Jada McCrary.
Awesome. Awesome. And on your link tree, will there be a link to pre order of Fae and Wicked Kings, which comes out later this year?
So there is a link to pre-order the anthology Romancing the Rogue, which has that and others. There's
Okay.
also ARC signups for that and another book I'm doing, Crowned by the Fae, which is the prequel to Blessed by the Fae. So
All
those are
right.
available.
Nice. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you everyone for joining me for another incredible, successful month here on the channel. And be on the lookout in the next few days for my announcement of August lineup. And I have a very special guest that I am really excited to share, but you just have to wait and see. And also, don't forget to pre-order yourself a copy of Michael, Last Angel of Earth. I will link it down below, the Barnes Noble link, as well as the link to join my ARC team. Thank you, everybody, so much from the bottom of my heart. 122 subscribers is incredible. Last time I remember, it was 105. 122 is incredible. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And again, thank you to Jada for being an amazing guest and being our last author for the month of July. Jada, thank you so very, very much. And I wish you the best success going forward on your journey from one author to another.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And as a bonus, who was your favorite guest to have here on the channel? Well, until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. And I will see you all in August.